What is up, everybody? This is my review of Mortal Kombat X. This is the 10th installment of the classic Mortal Kombat series. Now, I'm warning you now, this game is not made for kids. There's too much blood, violence, and cursing in this game. I will go into further elaboration on this later, but just know that this game is not made for kids. But anything I talk about here will be clean, and none of the inappropriate things in these games will come from me. I'll do my best to censor the footage I show, but this is your major disclaimer now. This game was created by NetherRealm Studios, who also made the Injustice games I recently talked about. MKX was released on April 14th, 2015 for Xbox One, PC, and PS4, although you can purchase it on current consoles as well, and they do run better on those. In this video, I will review the roster, the gameplay, the modes, and finally, the family friendliness. So without further ado, let's get started. As always, we have to start with the roster. The roster consists of Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Melina, Kata, Cassie Cage, Jackie Briggs, Kung Jin, Goro, Quan Chi, Raiden, Devora, Farah Tor, Reptile, Kotal Khan, Ermac, Liu Kang, Aaron Black, Johnny Cage, Kano, Shinnok, Kung Lao, Jax, Sonya Blade, Kenshi, and Kitana. This brings our base roster to 25 characters. Now for the DLC. The MK characters include Tanya, Trimmer, Triborg, and Bo Raicho. It's worth mentioning that Triborg is actually 4 characters in one, but I'll tell you why later. Finally, we have the guest characters. These include Alien, Leatherface, Predator, and Jason Voorhees.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Bringing the total roster to 33 characters. Now overall, I think that this is a fantastic roster. The only real missions for Mortal Kombat characters are Baraka, Noob Saibot, Shao Kahn, and Shang Tsung. They do introduce some new characters this game, dubbed the Combat Kids. Each of them are children of other fighters in the game, with similar fighting styles, but also with a twist. These include Cassie Cage as the daughter of Johnny Cage and Sonya Blade, Jackie Briggs as the daughter of Jax Briggs, Takeda as the son of Kenshi, and Kung Jin as the son of Kung Lao. Other new characters include Farah Tor, who are duo characters, and Devora, a creepy bug lady who I hate. I also wanted to mention Triborg, because he has a variation mechanic which allows him to change into 4 different cyber ninjas. These include Cyrax, Sector, and Cyber Smoke. There's one more that I'll talk about a little bit later. Also, I have to mention Bo Raicho. He is a clear joke character who throws up farts and is extremely fat. He's hilarious to play and fun all around. He's like Paul Blart mixed with the Karate Kid. But clearly, the stars of this roster are the guest characters. Personally, this is my favorite batch of guest characters so far. Going into Mortal Kombat X, I really didn't know what to expect. I don't know these characters too well other than the guests that appeared in Injustice 1 and 2, but the guest characters were what really drew me in. Being able to recreate Alien vs Predator in a fighting game is awesome, and those types of matchups are what these games love to include. Next is Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th franchise, who is my personal favorite guest they've ever done. The look, the attitude, and especially the gameplay is nailed to perfection. For those who don't know, Jason is often considered to be among the best characters in the game, and if you play him, you'll see why. Finally, we have Leatherface, from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. Try saying that 5 times fast. Now originally, the plan was to include Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise, so that him and Jason could face off because they are often compared. However, for unknown reasons, this never came to fruition. So, the NetherRealm team settled for Leatherface, and I think he was a good substitute. He's probably the second most random pick that NetherRealm has ever chosen as a guest character, but considering the other 3 choices were insanely awesome, I think that they could get away with a lesser known character. The guest characters, particularly the horror guest characters, will always be my favorite part of the Mortal Kombat game. Not only are they extremely popular and cool characters, but due to many different types of licensing issues between companies, I highly doubt there will ever be a full-fledged horror icon fighting game. This is the next best thing because of how good these games play. And now for the verse of the day. Psalm 100 verse 2 says, "Serve the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with joyful songs." Next we have the gameplay. In my opinion, this is the second best style of gameplay that Mortal Kombat has ever used, second only to Mortal Kombat 1. The gameplay is very similar to the Injustice games, which is fantastic. It feels extremely fast, extremely snappy, and extremely hard-hitting, if that makes sense. The meter burns are back, the environmental interactions are back, and the great game speed is back as well. Now, the big gameplay shakeup of this game is the variation system. When selecting a character, you can pick between 3 different variations of them. This allows you to play many different characters in different ways. When you choose a different variation, it changes their look and special moves. For example, Sub-Zero can only make an ice clone in a specific variation. Other certain moves cannot be changed and will always stay with every variation, like Scorpion's Spear. I think that this is a fantastic shape-up of the formula, and while most pro players pick one variation as their best and stick with it for each character, the ability to pick what moves you want is very helpful for a casual audience. On top of this, it changes how your character looks, creating an added incentive to pick certain characters. Probably the best example of this is Leatherface, because each variation changes which movie he is from, or what point in each movie he is from. Killer is the classic look, Butcher is the reboot look, and Pretty Lady is from a later point in the first movie. To be clear, I have not watched these movies, I just looked it up. What I also wanted to mention is how there's a way to go with a variationless moveset. Now this is clearly not the best version of each character, but if you're just playing casually and don't want to spend lots of time trying to figure out which variation you prefer, all you have to do is press A on your character, then tap up, up, and Y. This allows you to select the character with a different look as well as their base moveset. At this point, I'd also like to mention that Triborg is given a 4th character in this variation list, that being Cyber Sub-Zero. I think this is an awesome inclusion and should have been used more. In my opinion, they should have switched Goro with Kentaro in this way, although he is a little bit different than the others. Next, we move on to the modes. These include Single Fight, Towers, Test Your Luck, Story Mode, and the Crypt. First, Single Fight. And as always, this is exactly what you think it is. One fight against a computer player. Next is Towers, which is a series of fights ending in a boss fight against Shinnok, which will award you a character ending. The classic minigame Test Your Might, where you mash the face buttons as fast as possible to break a wooden board or something, is usually thrown into the middle of these for some variety. Test Your Luck is a mode where you do a single fight, but you are given up to 5 random modifiers, which changes up the gameplay drastically. These are modifiers like portals appearing in the ground, no special moves, or missiles flying at you off screen. I think this mode can be fun casually, but it's clearly not the way you're supposed to play the game normally. Story mode is up next, and it's also exactly what you think it is. A series of different fights which help progress a story that leads to a final boss against Shinnok, who you unlock after completing it. I don't know too much about these characters, so I really can't say how good or bad the story is because I didn't watch it. Any type of twist or reveal goes way over my head, like a fly ball when I'm playing baseball or something. Finally, we have the Crypt. This is a mode where you wander around a graveyard and break open tombstones to reveal things like costumes, fatalities, brutalities, and concept art. It's less of a mode and more like a shop, although you do have to search around to find certain items to unlock other areas, similar to something like an RPG. Overall, these modes are a fun distraction, but what I'm really here for is a single fight gameplay, which is fantastic. Personally, I'm not opposed to other modes in fighting games, but I rarely find myself using them unless they have cool unlockables like costumes or characters. Now the big question. Is this game suitable for kids or families? No, absolutely not. First, I'm going to touch on things that usually would be bad and tell you how they fare in this game. Firstly, for the most part, all the female characters look presentable. The only real exceptions to this are Melina and Tanya, who are not wearing a massive amount of clothing, but all the other characters are perfectly fine, and if you're still skeptical, they usually have costumes that allow them to be fully covered. So really no large complaints here. Now the language is interesting. For the most part, the entry dialogue is fine. There are a few bits of language between characters such as Johnny Cage, Mo Nitro, and Cassie Cage, but you can skip them anytime you start a match. On top of this, none of the guest characters speak. This makes sense for each of their characters either being mute or just being animals that make sounds. So if you want to play with the sound on but not hear any language, just play as them. Well guys, here's a crazy idea, right? You ready for this? Turn the sound off.
You just blew my mind.
Now we come to the big one, and that is blood. Yes, there are massive amounts of blood in this game. After all, the brutalities of the fighters in this game is what Mortal Kombat is most known for. Unfortunately, there's no way to turn this off, and almost every attack makes blood come out. Something that is interesting though is that your super move does not spill as much blood, but instead breaks bones inside the character's body. While this is still brutal, it's definitely toned down compared to later games. The one other thing I have to mention about blood is that each character has two different finishing moves called fatalities. Now I'm not going to show any of these because they are too brutal for YouTube, but basically, they equate to moves where you kill your opponent in a brutal and over-the-top fashion. However, these aren't mandatory and are really only there for bragging rights, so you can ignore them altogether. Very rarely will you accidentally activate one unless you have what's called an easy fatality coin, where you just hold the right trigger and press B or A, and the move will happen itself. Although as long as you're just aware that this will happen, you can usually not do it. You can do something else called brutalities, which means that you use certain special moves as your last attack, and the match will end with you killing the opponent. Although these can be difficult to execute because you have to complete a checklist of things before it allows you to do it. So it takes a high skill level to do this and to pay attention with which character you're using. Something else that is extremely interesting is that Alien, Predator, and Triborg all have different colors of blood. Alien has dark green, Predator has neon green, and Triborg has oil. Honestly, this is probably the cleanest Mortal Kombat game where you cannot turn off the blood. Some older titles do allow you to turn blood off, which makes them much more family friendly. But I don't think those games are as good as this one. So overall, this is clearly not a game made for kids or families. But does that make the game bad? In my opinion, I would say no. Just because this is not a family-friendly game doesn't mean that the controls, the roster, and the gameplay are not all fantastic. I give the age rating of the game a 14 to 15 plus rating. In conclusion, Mortal Kombat X is a fantastic fighting game. The gameplay is smooth and snappy, each character feels distinct, and the variation mechanic is one of the best additions in Mortal Kombat history. The guest characters are fantastic and a great reason for casual people to get into the game. My only real complaints about the game is the blood and how dark the game is. I mean that as in the visuals are very dark and honestly ugly. You can turn up the brightness on the game, which definitely helps, but the overall visual style of the game is not too appealing to me. Overall, I will give Mortal Kombat X a 9 out of 10. The only reason not a 10 is because it's not very family friendly and therefore not a very approachable game, unlike Injustice 1 and 2. You can usually buy the base version for $10 to $15 or the full version for $20 to $25 on Amazon. That's a pretty good price in my opinion. Now I wanted to take some time and mention that next week, Friday, July 23rd, at 4:30 p.m., I'll be doing my first live stream. Mortal Kombat will be at San Diego Comic-Con and having a panel at 5 p.m. Last year, they showed off Kombat Pack 1, and hopefully they should show Kombat Pack 2 this year. Hope you all join me, and come a little bit early and we can have some fun discussions about the game or anything else. Okay, see you then. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much, and please subscribe because I enjoy making these videos. Okay, bye.